I shut down, I get angry. It's like heat rises to my chest. One of the triggers is when I have to constantly repeat myself.
Where in your early years did you feel unheard?
I think a lot of it was the relationship with my sister. I remember feeling ignored a lot.
So it's deeply ingrained. That's just another pattern. Who do we pass that to?
Our children.
Welcome to Life Mastery. Today we're doing a live coaching session with an incredible human being. Stacy Irie Soul is a mother, yoga teacher, co-founder of the Tomorrow Today community, and confidence coach. As someone who has spent years in the wellness industry professionally supporting others and is so generously sharing a pattern that keeps showing up in her life. If you're ever someone who struggled with your triggers, your reactions, and have wondered why, you're gonna wanna listen to this. Hi everyone. Today I have a really special human being joining us. I'm here with Stacy Irie Soul. She is a mother of a beautiful baby girl. She is a yoga teacher. She is a confidence coach wanting to empower other women, and the co-founder of the Tomorrow Today community. And I know someone who is deeply passionate about helping others along the way on their journeys. So you're joining us today. We're gonna dive into something that has been persistently showing up in your life. We're gonna be doing a live coaching session and uncovering what is behind this persistent complaint. So share with me what's come up for you.
Yeah, when you ask the question, what's repeating, kind of what's a pattern, and I'm noticing one of the triggers that activates that anger and that frustration, ways I don't want to express myself, is when I have to constantly repeat myself. With words. I think not feeling heard or listened to.
That's right. Where is an example that that's happened?
Definitely in my relationship with my husband. I'm noticing it also showing up with my daughter, who's a toddler. And cognitively, I understand that at her age, the way her brain works, she's not going to be as able to, process or respond as an adult would. But it still creates these triggers I'm noticing more and more recently.
And then if somebody doesn't respond when you're repeating yourself, then what comes?
I shut down, I get angry, I get defensive, I get mean.
So you'll lash out. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so that's the pattern, right? I repeated, no, you didn't hear me. And then here it comes, right? Okay, beautiful. Tell me a little bit about your early years.
My early years.
What you remember growing up and what your family dynamic was like.
Early years, I spent a lot of time with my mom. I remember just being with her all of the time, outside of school and on weekends, running errands and going place to place. I have an older sister, but we have a big age gap, so we didn't really have much of a relationship growing up. And so I think I did attach a lot to my friends group. Okay.
And when you dealt with big things as a kid, we were chatting about just an experience earlier that you remembered when you were at school, or it was more of a fear that you had as a kid. And I asked you, I said, who helped you process that? How did you process difficult situations? Who talked you through those situations as a kid?
I don't think I had anyone to talk about those things.
So if you saw something, if you had a nightmare or a daymare or things that came up, who had to deal with it?
Me.
Now, when you were dealing with difficult things at school, if a kid hurt you or said something mean, or who did you share that with?
Honestly, I don't think I did. I think I just kind of dealt with it on my own.
You internalized it.
Yeah.
And then when your parents were making decisions, or if there was a way that you felt, or if there was something that you asked of them with your mom and your dad, what was the belief about your opinion at your age, at your little girl age?
It's the same today. That
It is, isn't it?
We're in this major hierarchy, and that like my opinion doesn't really matter, or I don't know.
Yeah. So the belief in your household growing up in your early years was that your opinion doesn't matter and you don't know. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that was the imprint. We talk about the first 7 years of your life, your inner child was created. And that is what is your automatic. It's so deeply imprinted on your nervous system. And every single human being watching, including myself, can relate to triggers. Now, we often think, do you ever blame people for how they make you feel?
Yes.
Yes. So if someone did something that's causing you suffering, it must be their fault.
Right.
Yes. How much energy do you spend trying to fix people around you to behave in the way that won't make you angry?
Yeah.
This is like what's considered normal, mm-hmm. right? When in fact, what is a trigger?
Again, cognitively, I know that like I'm responsible for how I feel, but even knowing that, like I still place the blame on others.
Yeah. Well, and we know we're responsible for how we feel, but what we often don't recognize is the degree trauma has colored our world and our relationships. Because there's nothing rational about what emerges from our trauma. So all a trigger is a feeling that reminds you of something that happened in your past, typically your early years, okay? Doesn't mean the situation was the same. It means the feeling was the same. Notice your triggers and my triggers will be different. Mm-hmm. Your triggers and Andrew's triggers will be different. Do you also notice that your triggers are predictable? Mm-hmm. The things that trigger you, the things that trigger Andrew, they're the same, right?
Right.
If we were to look at the last 10 years. Okay. So all a trigger is, when somebody does something that reminds you of a feeling from your early years, you're gonna, what comes out of you? What emerges from your trigger?
Anger.
Anger,
yeah.
Right? So every time a child experiences something that is beyond what they could handle, a wound gets created. Okay, and many of us, all of us, okay, in our parents' generation, there wasn't like a consciousness to how we raise our children. And what we need fundamentally in order to grow into the kind of human beings that can regulate their emotions, that can feel connected to themselves, right? We've both had to do a lot of work, mm-hmm. is we need to feel heard, we need to feel seen, we need to feel unconditionally loved. We need to feel safe. We need to feel like we belong.
Yeah.
If that isn't there, then what gets created?
Just more pain.
More pain.
More anger.
The wound, well, the pain gets created first. And in those early years, when the pain gets created and it's too much to handle, then we develop a way of dealing with the world. This is the mask. Do you notice when some people are triggered, they shut down, they avoid, and then when some people are triggered, they lash out, they get angry? Mm-hmm. What does your mask look like?
Depending on the day, both, but typically it's the rage monster.
Right. Yeah. And do you notice that's consistent with the trigger? That like when you're triggered, that will emerge? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so your internal blueprint has unhealed wounds from your early years that are then protected by the anger. I have your false self. I know her well. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so once that anger emerges, who are you blaming for the way you feel?
The person who wasn't listening.
Yeah. So in that moment with your mom or with your daughter or with your husband, where does it show up in your body when they're not listening to you?
I guess like heat rises through the chest and...
It's somatic, right? It's like, where in your early years did you feel unheard?
I mean, this is something I tried to explore before, so what's coming up again through it is I think a lot of it was the relationship with my sister, because, you know, you have a sister, you grew up in the same household, but we weren't close. And I guess I remember feeling ignored a lot, like at home, wanting to play with her things, or, you know, and there was like a big block there for her.
Right. So you had a big age gap. Now let's look a little deeper, okay? With your parents. Now you told me, what was their belief around children? What's some of their fundamental beliefs about children's opinions at 4, 5, 6 years old?
They shouldn't have many.
They shouldn't have any. You have an opinion?
Yeah.
Does your opinion matter?
No.
No. A 4 or 5-year-old, now with your daughter, when they're around, what are their opinions about a little girl?
It's shifted a bit.
Okay, good.
As a little bit, right?
How does it show up for you guys now when you're sharing something with them?
Yeah, it's similar, because if we have, and we do have very different beliefs, and it's still that hierarchy of, well, you know, they're older, they've been around longer, they've seen a lot more, and so, you know, you'll see.
You'll see.
Yeah.
So there is a very cultural norm around superiority, around I'm the parent, I'm the grandparent, I know. Your opinion doesn't matter. Yeah, and unknowingly it actually creates a trauma, a pain point within the child. Then what does that child learn about when they have to say something? What becomes familiar to them?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter.
You don't matter. And so that little girl with that unhealed wound, every time she experiences that same feeling, that will look like I'm repeating myself. Even if logically you're like, I know my daughter can't cognitively always hear me. What still emerges in you?
It's that anger, that pain.
And that's how you know it's an unprocessed trauma. So when there is this consistent reaction, this consistent pain point, this consistent experience that's very predictable if you look at the last 10 years, then that is something that hasn't been healed or examined from your early years that will then follow you throughout your entire life. Now, if that goes unexamined, who do we pass that to?
Our children. We just repeat the pattern.
That's right. And so if I were to talk to your adult self today, does your voice matter?
Of course, yeah.
And if someone isn't hearing you, what could you say to them?
I need you to hear me right now.
Yeah.
Give me your full attention.
Right.
But in a kind way.
That's right. See, and this is where you know it's like unhealed trauma. Because if we were in our adult selves, we could say something that rational. We could say, I feel unheard, or I need your full attention. Can you make eye contact, please? Right? That all comes from a place of abundance and communication. But because that trauma still lives, what does it actually sound like when someone doesn't hear you?
Hello. Yeah.
That's honest.
Yeah.
And we can all relate to triggers in our own way and ways that we react. Even if it doesn't manifest exactly that way, we have versions of it. And so this is a generous invitation for everybody. If you're listening to this, and if you're triggered, if you're constantly reacting, the root cause is not external. If you're blaming people around you, if you think your husband did this, and your mom did that, and your daughter did that, then you're going to spend a lifetime of suffering. And not taking responsibility for the reaction that emerges from that trigger.
Right. So when we are catching ourselves in those reactions, and we're knowing that this is now not adult me reacting, this is like inner child, little me.
That's right.
How do we like switch it in that moment?
Right, because it's so automatic.
Because and always in retrospect, or but like to start that process of breaking the pattern, because then when I'm reacting in that way, then I'm creating the trigger in the other person, and then we're just in this loop.
That's right. And the real spiritual journey, the journey back to self, is the degree in which you've transformed everything that's taken you away from yourself, so that you're living a life that's truly connected. And your natural state of being is one that's in joy, peace, freedom, abundance, communication, creation, all the things that allow us to create life powerfully. So for those who are like noticing triggers emerging, this is the beginning of a practice. If you're not in a practice, you're doomed. Because if you have children, they're just going to learn how to communicate that way. If you're in a relationship, you're going to kill your connection and intimacy on both sides. And this is the triggers and traumas on both sides. And so one rule, first of all, I say when there is a trigger, no communication. And this is a deep practice. The moment you notice you're triggered, pause. Have we ever been triggered and not regretted it? What comes out of our mouth?
Yeah.
Does it ever work?
No.
Never. Right? Because we unleash this fire that's like rising within us. And then what impact does it have on the other person?
Then it just shuts them down, and then you're just in the potentially in this back and forth, or just now not communicating.
That's right.
And
this is
space
where a trauma bond gets created. There's no real connection. There's no real intimacy. You're in survival together. And so, one, if you're triggered, no communication. It never works. It's never a good idea. Your practice, and part of your authentic spiritual practice, is going to be to learn to regulate those emotions and to know deeply that no one's caused them other than unmet needs in your early years. That's number one. It always begins with awareness. Because if we believe that they were caused by another, we will keep lashing out at the other and will remain enslaved to our pattern and cause suffering with ourselves and everyone around us. So that would be the first step. The second step is going back and really excavating those early years. That's one pattern out of so many. Fully identifying that inner child, fully identifying the impact that unconsciousness had on us. And this, as a mother, this is what really awakened me as both an individual and a mother. We will then see how unconscious our culture is today around parenting.
Yeah.
And what we don't want to pass on. We were just chatting earlier about, comments made by parents and what's considered normal and how much projections will come. And you can easily start feeling like you're doing something wrong when you're not doing what everyone else is doing. It can make you feel a little like the odd one out. When you get the impact of trauma and see the impact that could have on our children, what's the only way to not pass it on to them?
It's to heal it, to face it head on.
And most human beings are walking around activated 100 times a day with infinite number of patterns due to unhealed trauma. So if the intention is optimal health, if the intention is to empower our children, if the intention is to have deeply connected relationships with our loved ones that include communication and intimacy, what needs to happen?
We need to choose the more difficult route, because it's easier to ignore these things and to just continue and carry on.
That's right. Yeah. And I promise you, they don't go away. They just get worse. They get more inflamed. They get more activated. And then we just hand it to the next generation unconsciously. And so that, one, identifying where it came from, and two, just the practice of you pausing before you're triggered and having the awareness of what that really is versus, and if you're listening to this, if you blame people in your life, if you're blaming your partner or your child or your work, I invite you to really look at what is causing you suffering. Not from your automatic lens, but from what's been familiar over the past 10 years that keeps emerging. And I know you're so committed to your journey and your family and being like the best version of yourself for your daughter. And so thank you for being in this conversation and being willing to look.
Yes, thanks for having me.
That's it. It's that simple and radical. And even something as radical as I am no longer going to blame anyone around me for how I feel. It's very radical. And it's so much easier to blame. It's so much easier to lash.
Yeah. Like even the conversation earlier, I was saying like, because after I spoke to the teacher and the nanny, it was like, they made me feel like I'm doing something wrong, or I shouldn't even be here then, or whatever, but it's actually turning it around into like how, like where are these feelings stemming from that were already there from the past?
Exactly.
That they're just activating them to come back through.
And that's a perfect situation where it's like, they made me feel. Can they really make you feel? Can they?
No. And then I guess the feeling was, like we were saying, like, well, I'm choosing a completely different than the norm.
That's right.
And so it's like, now am I like second guessing and not trusting or feeling like I'm,
But here's where the
wrong.
Awareness is so powerful. Because the minute you notice that, look at the suggestion, and mothers deal with this all the time, opinions from parents, from in-laws, from other mothers. As soon as something's put into the space, what impact does it have on us? What impact did it have on you when these comments came up?
Yeah, no, I just like second guessing myself, not feeling certain.
Right. And where in your early years did it matter what other people thought?
All the time. It all like my family, like the culture, the gossip, like you always had to, put on that mask and not have everyone else know your business or want anyone else to know what was going on, to be talking about you or your family or anything. So, yeah.
You needed to look good for everybody else.
Yeah.
And that still exists today for a lot of parents, because if their kid is good, what does it mean about them?
Yeah, that they're good.
That they're good, right? So it's deeply ingrained. That's just another pattern. If we went through every pain point, we could literally identify infinite patterns that end up shaping your life experience, how life feels, how you connect, what you pass to your daughter, literally your entire world. And in that case, let's use that, because everything becomes a spiritual practice. As mom's made a comment, I'm noticing what is coming up in me. Oh, I see the pattern of, actually, let me ask you, what's the pattern that would come up in you when they make a comment?
I guess just not trusting in myself.
Not trusting in yourself. When were you taught to not trust yourself? Not consciously. When were you taught to give up what mattered in order to look a certain way, to be good, to behave?
I guess it's just that whole like not being able to fully express myself.
Right.
Like not even being allowed to cry.
Yeah.
To show emotion, to feel, get over it, or do you want something to cry about?
Yeah,
like,
I got that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think, as we're talking about like what's happening subconsciously in those formative years, then it's like not even being able to trust myself in what I'm feeling for myself, because I'm being told not to express it, or that it's wrong to feel that way, or that I'm too sensitive, or
What would it be like if you were so firmly planted in your values? You were so firmly planted in what you believe to be true that you gave up the opinion and validation of other people.
Yeah. Then I wouldn't care what others thought, and it wouldn't create these triggers or this questioning or this inner turmoil. And I would just live my life exactly how I felt without even considering what anyone else would think.
What do you want for your daughter?
I just want her to be happy and to thrive and to be at her own pace and to grow up knowing that she can trust herself and trust us and just continue to fully express herself and be as loud and take up as much room as she does now.
So what would it be like if she was so firmly planted in her values that she gave up the opinion, needing the validation of people around her? What would be available to her?
She would just be able to master her life and create whatever she wanted and follow her passions and not second guess or get trapped in what most people I feel like are trapped in, you know, like waking up one day and wondering, how did I get here and why am I doing this and who chose this? She choose for herself.
What's the only way that you can give that to her?
By healing those wounds and triggers within myself so that she's not picking it up for me and learning it from me, which is already what's I'm seeing happen at already just 3 years and why I'm so committed to continuing on this path.
And you're part of a very small percentage of human beings that are willing to look, that have the courage to say, I'm not passing that on to my daughter. I share that with you, with my children. It's a no. It's a no for all the suffering it creates in my life. And so I really acknowledge your stand for like growth, for seeking, for wanting better for her, for you, for your family. And it takes something, right? Because it's so automatic.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to say it again, but thank you for like being here, for being willing, for looking. And that becomes the invitation. Every trigger is an opportunity to grow. And if you took on that one radical thing from today, that what if nobody, no human being in your life ever got to trigger you again?
Right.
And it'll happen a million times.
Yeah.
And you can be in the practice of something so much more inspiring.
Yeah.
Take it on?
Yeah. No, take all of that and just shift that to curiosity and pause.
And pause. Yes. Good job, Mama.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for listening to Life Mastery Stories. If you are curious about how this life mastery methodology could work for you, click the link in the description. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share with anyone who you think might benefit from hearing it. See you next time.